Hello, I'm Eleanor, and welcome to The Dark Side of the Wight, a series that focuses on the dark, sinister and ungainly parts of the island's history. Today I am in Brading, a town with historical significance. Now last time Jack was here looking for an old railway carriage, but I'm here today looking for a person, a mysterious individual who was one of many that represented the most flawed and faulted escape attempts in the island's history. Who was this person? His name was Louis De Rochfort. If that name sounds familiar to you, then you may have perhaps visited the former Brading Waxworks Museum, a once creepy, unsettling place, sure to be nightmare material. One of those gruesome exhibits being a depiction of Louis's fate. Because of this mysterious character is commonly associated with folklore, but Louis was a real person, on a real mission, that would lead to his horrific death. To understand that mission though, we have to first head west to the notable town of Carisbrooke. Those who know and have visited would be in no doubt why Carisbrooke is such a popular place to visit on the island. That, of course, being its centrepiece, the castle, which is situated high on the hill above the town. The castle as it stands today was mostly built between 1100 and 1336, the original architects being the Normans. But some believe that a fort of some kind was constructed high on this hilltop long before that. Throughout history, the castle has played a significant role in the island's defences, including during the French invasion of 1377. Possibly the most famous footnote in the castle's history, though, was in the mid-17th century, when it became a prison for one sole inmate, the King of England at the time, Charles I. The story of Charles I was one of defeat, deceit, and in some cases, just plain bad luck. Crowned the King of England, Scotland and Ireland in 1625, his reign would quickly become controversial. Charles's father, James I, ruled for many years with a heavy hand. Tensions then were already high when Charles took the throne. But the new king would not make things easy for himself, quarrelling frequently with Parliament from the get-go, and then there was his controversial marriage the same year he became king. His marriage to Henrietta Maria of France certainly ruffled the English Puritans' feathers. Henrietta, of course, being a Roman Catholic. This friction between the royalists and the parliamentarians, many the latter's supporters being Presbyterians, led to what we know as the Second English Civil War. Charles facing off with the might of Cromwell's new model army, and to put it simply, it would be a war that Charles was doomed to lose. After being captured in 1646, Charles was imprisoned firstly at Hampton Court Palace, before later being held at Carisbrooke Castle. In November 1647, Charles was actually offered the opportunity to escape, but he turned it down. Being quite early on in his imprisonment, he feared that something may go wrong, and remained hopeful that his captors would see sense and let him go, of their own accord. But as the cold winter months rolled past and the following spring dawned, Charles's anxiety grew, and soon the opportunity to escape started to look like the only option. Two documented escape attempts were made. His first attempt in March 1648 saw Charles try and flee by climbing out of his window and lowering himself down a silk cord to the castle courtyard. This would prove futile as poor Charles became stuck between the bars on his window and the escape was called off. On May 29th, a second attempt was made to flee his captivity. Nitric acid and a hacksaw was smuggled into his room in order for him to remove the bars from his window. Unfortunately for Charles though, a guard just happened to walk into his room at the exact moment he was making his escape. Charles never escaped. He was instead moved to London, where he went on trial, during which he continued to stand firm against his captors, proud and stubborn until the end, when, on the 27th of January 1649, the High Court of Justice declared Charles guilty of overthrowing the rights and liberties of the people. And 3 days later, he was taken to Whitehall, and outside the banqueting house, in front of the vast crowd of onlookers, he was beheaded. Possibly his very last thought being of his children, wife, and perhaps what may have been if one of the escape attempts had indeed been successful. Now, how does this relate to Louis De Rochfort? Well, these two escape attempts were well documented because they were the closest to success. There were many other escape attempts planned that didn't come as close. One of them involving our friend Louis. Louis was supposedly a French agent, a spy on a mission to deliver a message to the king during the time of his imprisonment at Carisbrooke. It is speculated that he was here to convey and gather information, perhaps another effort to flee his captivity. Louis, though, would never deliver his message, and he would instead meet a ghastly end here in Brading. Rumour has it that Louis stayed on the first floor of this building, which at the time was a coaching inn. One night, he retired to his room to get some rest in anticipation of his journey to Carisbrooke. But in the dead of night, Louis succumbed to a brutal attack, bludgeoned to within an inch of his life. But in his dying words, he stated clear and swore that he would haunt the place he'd die, the very spot where he lay, until his body was returned to France. A suspect was never found, and for many years after, it was unknown exactly what happened to Louis, or indeed where he was buried. The situation surrounding his death is certainly shady, to say the least. From then on, guests at the inn started reporting murmurings and other odd noises coming from the room in which Louis stayed that fateful night. Despite this, it was for a while assumed, though, that Louis had been returned to France all those years ago to fulfill his dying wish. But in 1964, whilst undertaking maintenance work under the historic courtyard, metres from Louis' guest room, workers found the body of a man dating to the 17th century, with no other records of a man of his description dying in the vicinity during the time period. It was concluded that this skeleton was in fact our unlucky friend, Louis De Rochfort. Since then, many attempts were made to return Louis home to France. Very much in keeping with his story though, luck wouldn't appear to be on his side. No relatives of Louis were found, so therefore he resided in the place where he met his gruesome end. Louis then became what many may remember him as, a spooky chapter in the Brading House of Horrors, a waxwork being created to tell his story, and his remains put on display to the public in a glass-topped coffin. In 2010 though, the waxworks sadly closed and many of its assets sold off to the highest bidder. It is difficult to track exactly what went where, but apparently Louis was one of the last to leave. Thanks to some rare footage by IOW Archive, we can see Louis' coffin sat alone, and even if it's uncertain whether Louis was still inside or not, it's spookily symbolic. almost as if after all these years, his tortured soul was still chained to the very place he met his fateful end. The coffin, though, was eventually moved and Louis's remains auctioned off, and as the memories of Brading's beloved Waxworks museum faded, so did the story of Louis De Rochfort. It is hard to trace the movements of Louis since 2014, but after a bit of digging, it turns out Louis still resides on the island, not far from the place of his death. In fact, just across the marshes in Bembridge. After being auctioned off, Louis apparently found himself in the hands of a collector, whom since then has looked after him at their place in Bembridge. Unfortunately, Louis's owner is currently away on holiday, so we are unable to visit just yet, but they assured me personally that he is very well looked after. It appears that Louis's wish to return to France is unlikely to be granted anytime soon, but at least for now he is in safe hands and is well looked after. Perhaps then, after nearly 400 years, luck, it seems, is finally on Louis's side.